This is Proxy Countdown. Welcome to the big show for the week of September 16th, 2024. Alongside my tag team partner, Matt Moscardi. I'm Damion Rallis on today's countdown. New Air Jordans at Nike. 23andMe reduced to me. Activist Investor Elliot Management is still not happy with Southwest Airlines. A pay committee mutiny at OpenText. And on the big vote, Matt lashes out at dinosaur delivery company FedEx. We'll see if he really lashes out.
Yeah, it's not really lashing.
Let's go right to our trade wire. We have a lot of big stories this week. Nike CEO John Donahoe, who has been Nike's CEO since only 2020, will retire, quote unquote, from his position on October 13th and be replaced immediately by company veteran Elliott Hill, who worked at Nike for 32 years before retiring in 2020. So somewhat of a boomerang going on at Nike. Two of the people behind the change are, of course, Nike co-founder Phil Knight and current chair Mark Parker. Knight said that he, quote, couldn't be more excited to welcome Elliott back to the team and that we have got a lot of work to do, but I'm looking forward to seeing Nike back on its pace. So, okay, I point this out to help demonstrate the importance of our influence percentages at freeflowanalytics.com. Co-founder Phil Knight is not on the Nike board anymore. I don't think he has an executive position anymore. He doesn't work there anymore.
No, he owns the shares, though.
But notice that on CNBC.com, he's the one talking about hiring the new CEO. He's the one excited to get to work again. But here's the point. His son, Travis Knight, is still on the board, and that's why we at Free Float give him 54% of the board influence, because his father continues to pull strings, as our influencer percentage would suggest. Also, the chair, Mark Parker, has 10% influence, even more than retiring CEO John Donahoe. So as you can see, this is a precarious leadership position in the first place for the lame duck CEO, one that our influence percentages were already hinting at. When we see these numbers, we often see the case where we see boomerangs coming back, boomerang CEOs, we see founders coming back, we see all kinds of things, but this is exactly what our data was predicting.
I mean, Mark Parker was the CEO of Nike also, so there's a lot of CEOs involved here. It does seem telling, though, that Donahoe was chosen in 2020 and Elliott left exactly then. Mm-hmm. And now they're flipping. Do you think it's just buyer's remorse? They gave him 4 years. They said, all right, it's time to get out. Yeah, this is a long-term Chapek. Mark Parker also on the board of Disney during the Chapek issue.
Elliott Hill will receive $3 million in equity and $4 million in cash to rejoin Nike, while Donahoe will be allowed to, quote-unquote, resign, meaning he will receive the full value of all of his remaining equity awards. Good for Donahoe there. Moving on, all of 23andMe's independent directors resigned from its board this week, something that we want to happen at places like Tesla and Meta and a bunch of other companies. They are, I'll give them a final goodbye. Roloff Bota, Patrick Chung, Sandra Hernandez, Neil Mohan, Valerie Montgomery Rice, Richard Scheller, and Peter Taylor, all gone. The resignations follow drawn-out negotiations with 23andMe CEO and co-founder Ann Wojcicki, who wants to take the company private. In a letter addressed to the CEO and now only director, the 7 directors said they had yet to receive a fully financed, fully diligenced, actionable proposal that is in the best interest of the non-affiliated shareholders from the CEO after months of efforts. In response, the CEO said in an SEC filing, "I am surprised and disappointed. We will immediately begin identifying independent directors to join the board." But that's sort of the problem in the first place, isn't it? 23andMe is not a we. It's never been a we. It's been a she. And now I guess it's merely a me. I mean, I'm sorry to continue that stupid joke going. But, okay, so the directors also argued that while they still believe in 23andMe's mission, their departures were for the best due to the CEO's concentrated voting power and a clear difference of opinion on the company's future. So Anne, she controls 50% of the voting power of 23andMe due to her ownership of 59% of Class B shares, which magically grant her the right to 10 votes per share. And I'll tell you this, Matt, the foreshadowing was already in the company's ticker symbol, which was me. So again, this is a problem that the data was already foreshadowing, right? I mean, this is a company that where the independent directors had no voice. It never had a voice.
Yeah, but let's actually backtrack to the hypocrisy of at least two of these directors. Neil Mohan is the CEO of YouTube, and Roelof Botha was on the board of YouTube. He was on the board of Square. He's on the board of like a half dozen companies that are dual class companies. All of the sudden, they don't like one of the founders. It really is.
Yeah.
The problem here, it has very little to do with the actual strategy, because the Elon Musks of the world get away with this without dual class shares, and they have no strategy. They're just making stuff up as they go along. In this case, they've lost 97% of the share value since it went public via SPAC, right? That's all that we're looking at. The shares are basically penny stocks. 23andMe is basically a penny stock now. And that is why these people who are high tech, Silicon Valley, tech bro-y, types, they're leaving because they're losing their own money and there's no upside. It's just about the money. So it never was. The hypocrisy is pointing out that this has to do with shareholder rights at all. Mm-hmm. That we think it's in the best interest that we leave, considering your concentrated voting power. That's pure hypocrisy. They don't leave anywhere else for that reason, and they're on a dozen boards that are like that.
Neil Mohan is the new CEO at YouTube. Worth pointing out that Ann's sister Susan, who passed away a few months ago, if I'm not mistaken, her sister Susan Wojcicki was the former CEO of YouTube. So that's what's going on at 23andMe. There are a few egregious bonuses to report on. At Sarepta Therapeutics, newly appointed director Deidre Connolly. So she starts with an initial equity grant worth over $700,000. And she'll be getting annual pay of $60,000, meaning that basically they're handing her 12 years of salary before she even does a thing. That seems a little out of balance.
That's a nice bonus.
12
years.
Lattice Semiconductor announced the appointment of Ford Tamer. That's a great name. Ford Tamer as CEO. Ford will receive $30 million in sign-on awards, equity awards, on top of a $10 million target equity award in 2025. And at Mattel, the toy company, the compensation committee approved a one-time retention award to CEO Yinon Kryza, valued at $15 million. That's just for sticking around, I guess.
We got to stop her with retention awards. That's what bonuses and salaries are.
Exactly.
Those are
Do
for
your
retention.
job in the first place, compensation committee. We have a boomerang director at Synchrony Financial. Daniel Kaloa rejoins the board after serving in 2014 and 2015. And finally, at Warner Brothers Discovery, I like this one. The board is emulating the magic making of Hollywood. Daniel Sanchez is joining the board as an independent director, despite the fact that he is the nephew of fellow director John C. Malone, who has been on the board since 2008, chairs the nomination committee, and was CEO of Discovery Holding Company when it merged with Discovery. Despite all that, the filing states that, quote, no arrangements exist between Mr. Sanchez or any other person pursuant to which he was selected as a director, end quote.
There's not an arrangement that he has to be at Thanksgiving dinner. That's just optional.
He doesn't have to be his nephew. He just is. Let's move over to our proxy cage matches. We have a lot of activist investor stuff to report on. We have an activist investor win at Massimo. Activist investor Politan Capital won the 2 board seats it was seeking at medical technology company Massimo, defeating founder and CEO Joe Kiani and another director, Chris Chavez. So Darlene Solomon and Bill Jellison will join the company. Just talked about this 23andMe. This is exactly why dual class share structures where the founder or CEO control the company voting power, despite holding less than half of company shares, continue to be outrageous. At Massimo, Joe Kiani controlled only 9% of the company vote through a share structure where one share equals one vote.
That's so weird.
Right? And this is what allowed shareholders to have an actual voice, right?
I like the concept.
All right.
It's a cute concept.
At Southwest Airlines, where we reported last week that 6 directors have resigned, 4 new directors will be added. An executive chair and former CEO Gary Kelly will resign in 2025. Activist Investor Elliot Management wants the chair to leave earlier than planned and still wants CEO Bob Jordan to step down. So Elliott's not done. They want more to happen over at Southwest Airlines.
I don't disagree with them. Why do they must listen to this show?
Yeah.
Why do we have 2025 as a target? It doesn't take that long to leave. And if in Gary Kelly's case, he's been there since 1996, something
Basically
like that.
doing everything at the company, including being CEO.
If he hasn't yet taught anyone on the board or at the company how to do their job, he's not going to do it by 2025.
Nelson Peltz's activist hedge fund Trian Partners, back in the news, is among the shareholders reportedly calling for a shakeup at pest control firm Rent-A-Kill. Rent-A-Kill. I like that name, Rent-A-Kill.
I don't want to rent the kill. I kind of want to. I want to own it.
And again, you're pointing out the only reason why this is happening is a drop in share price. They reportedly want U.S. head Brad Paulson and CFO Stuart Ingle Toombs to turn in their bathroom keys. They want them gone.
Okay.
And finally, activist investor Engine Capital. Is that the same as Engine One? Engine Capital?
No, different. Yeah.
Engine Capital. They have roughly a 4% stake in freelance marketplace Upwork, and they're pushing for a shakeup to the company's board. In a letter to Upwork's board, Engine questioned whether Upwork's board has been adequately overseeing management.
Good question.
Specific problems cited include the fact that there have been 3 CFOs in 4 years. Yeah, that seems like a problem.
That's a lot.
The lengthy tenures of Chair Thomas Layton and another director, and the numerous business relationships between various directors which diminished their independence. And finally, the fact that none of Upwork's directors have any apparent experience in the staffing industry. That seems like a major problem.
You sound like the Carolina Panthers. This is not great.
It's worth pointing out that Upwork is one of the rare boards in our database that shows full female control. 59% of influence is held by women, including CEO Hayden Brown. All right, just want to point that out.
I like that.
Moving over to our vote results table. First, the losers. There are not a lot of annual meetings going on, but first the losers at Agilsys. 32% of shareholders said no to Michael Kaufman. 32% said no to Elon Oren, and 24% said no to James Momtazi at Roivant Sciences. And at AAR Corp, 27% of shareholders are done with Michael Boyce. So those are the
losers.
Worth
saying, Roivant is Vivek Ramaswamy's ex-firm, the firm that he founded, and they have yet to actually be profitable. Although Vivek made millions of dollars off of it. So maybe that's part of, maybe somebody actually looked backwards and said, wait a minute, you guys shouldn't be on this board.
Some of the winners include Emily Heath at Gen Digital and June Yang at NetApp, who both got 99.8% support. The big winner this week is Maha Ibrahim at Decker's Outdoor. She received the heartfelt support of 99.9% of voting shareholders. The good news here, Matt, is that they're all women, so maybe something good's happening in the world. Maybe this is a sign that Kamala is going to win the election.
Yeah, your optimism is cute.
At Nike, it should come as no huge surprise that there is a major leadership change, as there seemed to be a bit of a protest vote at the company's annual meeting last week. 40% of Class B voters rejected Director John Rogers Jr., 17% said no to say-on-pay, and there was actually relatively high support for 2 shareholder proposals, one on supplemental pay equity disclosure, another on environmental targets. They both got 26% yes. I'm only pointing it out because they usually get a lot lower than that. And maybe shareholders were just pissed off. I don't know.
I like that big losing votes are like 20%.
I know.
Yeah.
And finally, let's end on a nice annual meeting mystery just in time for fall. At Open Text Corporation, 75% of shareholders said a big no to say-on-pay. So what's the mystery? Here's some of the mystery. First of all, the company did not properly file its proxy statement with the SEC. I couldn't find it on the SEC database, which is odd. It just doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen very much. Yeah.
I had to find it in PDF form after an extensive Google search. I still can't really figure out why it wasn't posted with the SEC. Secondly, only 2 of the 4 pay committee members were even scheduled to be up for re-election. I don't know why. 2 of them just kind of wandered away. And then, minutes before the meeting, pay committee chair Ann Powell mysteriously resigned.
Wow.
She didn't want to face the music, I guess. And so only 1 pay committee member was even voted on, and then Sam Pay got ruthlessly defeated. So a bit of a mystery there at
What
open
was
text.
do we know what the results were for that 1 pay committee member's vote?
He got 14% against, which is not that high. It's only
That's
double
not-
the other directors. But maybe I'm thinking that they were mad at Ann Powell. I don't know. Maybe that's why
So you're saying 2 of them were in the break room.
2 disappeared
when the vote came out, and 1 quit.
Yeah,
And
1 quits right before the meeting.
Right
It's
before
in
the actual meeting.
It's in the 8K. It's in the filing announcing the results of the meeting that Ann Powell just kind of said, no thanks, I'm out of here.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of a weird
I love
one.
that.
Yeah.
I'd love to know why. That's great.
All right, that's it for me. Let's go on to the big vote. We got FedEx. FedEx's meeting's actually coming up soon, Mondays. I hope you're listening to this today, on Friday. I don't. I'm just gonna hand this one off to you. I don't have a lot to preface all this. I will say that FedEx, we know, is basically controlled by founder Frederick Smith. Am I wrong?
Yeah, Fred Smith, he actually owns only 8.4% of the shares, but he
remains
is the single largest shareholder.
Yeah, he remains on the board as executive chair, former CEO. He's kind of like the Phil Knight of Nike.
Without the dual class, he's more like the Jeff Bezos.
Okay, but he does control, according to us, 64% of board influence. He's 80 years old. He's been on the board since 1971. The only other thing I wanted to point out before I hand it over to you is this is striking, probably because of his control. There's a striking female power gap on this board. So 36% of actual board members are women, but they only hold, I think, only hold a total of 9% of influence at FedEx.
Yeah, that's going to be common in any of the founder or dual class boards.
Still.
But here's the underlying question.
All right,
so
go
this
ahead.
was hard to analyze because if you're looking at it from a purely fundamental standpoint, FedEx doesn't underperform. I mean, it's like a Jim Cramer favorite stock. It's like, the share price has been strong. They're doing tons of share buybacks and dividends along the way. It's like people like FedEx. It's actually, by all accounts, fairly well run. But we cover Meta and other dual class companies. We cover founder firms like this. And I think I came to one underlying question, which will be the premise of the votes here, which is, at what point is it worth keeping a strong performing founder in perpetuity exchange for influence over the board? If you are a shareholder in this company, you basically have no real influence over the board. Everyone defers to Fred Smith in this case, including, and we could talk about the board itself. There are really 3 core groups of people on this board. There's a set of sort of lobbyists, government types. Okay. Susan Schwab, she was an ambassador in trade. Josh Ramo, he was at Kissinger, the political consultant, and they're kind of like lobbying adjacent. Nancy Norton was at the Department of Defense. You have Fred Smith's favorite toys, I called them, which is Paul Walsh, who's been on the board since 1996. What he currently does right now is he owns whiskey companies and sports. He's the CEO of McLaren, a sports car company, right? That's just
fun, like a buddy.
Right?
That's a buddy.
That's a buddy. You're the guy you golf with. He gives you free whiskey and you take a ride in a McLaren. Stephen Gorman, he actually does. He works in planes. Fred Smith went to Vietnam. He was in. He flew planes. He has a deep love of planes.
Well, I guess that makes sense with FedEx, right?
And it actually, it's part of the founding story. In fact, he's a Purple Star. He's won multiple,
Who's this?
War
Gorman
veteran, Fred Smith.
Okay.
Smith. And Gorman's doing air medical evac, the CEO of an air medical evac company and a plane enthusiast, right? Josh Ramo, again, he worked in TV and media for a long time. Brad Martin is the Tennessee state representative. FedEx is based in Memphis, Tennessee. It's been there for its entire existence. And Brad Martin is close. These are like Fred Smith's toys, right? Like these are people he likes to hang around, I think.
Well, sure. It's his board. It's his company.
And then there's the group I'm just calling the diverse crowd. And when I say diverse crowd, I mean literally all of the women and people of color for the most part, with the exception of Josh Ramo. It's Sylvia Davila, who's the new director, Susan Griffith, Amy Lane, Fred Purpall, Marvin Ellison, like all of the other people. They're either black men or women or women of color. Like there's just kind of others in there.
Yeah.
But what I did notice about this, and this seems to be the big trade-off, and this is maybe the genius of Fred Smith in some ways. Fred Smith, the founder, has a long track record of making sure Fred Smith, the shareholder, is taken care of. By that, I mean, Fred Smith owns 8.4% of the shares. He's the largest individual, the single largest shareholder in the company. It's not dual class, but he's the largest shareholder. But if he wants to make money, he's not paying himself a salary. It looks stupid to pay yourself, $100 million a year, when what you can do is make the board issue dividends and share buybacks that make you $100 million a year. So the last dividend, he netted $108 million for the annual dividend last year.
Okay, and you don't see that in the summary compensation table, obviously.
It's never going to be in the summary compensation because he didn't get any compensation from the company. He got compensation as a shareholder. In fact, FedEx bought back $2 billion in shares in 2023. There's another $1 billion expected by the end of this year. They paid $1.3 billion in dividends last year, and it's likely the same this year. He is making money hand over fist, just not as a executive at FedEx, as a shareholder at FedEx. Now, you would say that this is great because it aligns, he's aligned with shareholders, but it also means that his personal pay is often dictated not by what's best for the company necessarily, but what's best for him as a shareholder, getting paid himself. His politics also dictate. There are a few S&P 500 companies that donate almost exclusively to one party, or at least heavily skewed to one party, because they recognize the fact that they need lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in order to pass laws for them. They need to lobby everything. FedEx is one of the exceptions. For more than a decade, it's heavily conservative leaning. They lean GOP, and as a result, Fred Smith was actually endorsed Trump and lobbied hard in the Trump administration. There was a long New York Times piece about how hard Fred Smith and FedEx lobbied to get tax cuts passed under the Trump administration, where in 2017, FedEx paid $1.5 billion in taxes, and in 2018, after the tax cuts, they paid $0. And what they did with that money was spend an inordinate amount of it on share buybacks and dividends, which is paying Fred Smith, the shareholder, right?
Good for Fred.
It's very, very smart, right?
Yeah.
And Fred Smith did not like the report at all. He threatened to fight Sulzberger, who's the chief editor at the Times, in the parking lot behind it. I think we covered this in a really old show. He sort of fake stepped down in 2020. He replaced himself with Rajesh Subramaniam.
Yep, part of our
who's a FedEx lifer.
Southeast Asian CEO theory, right?
Southeast Asian male founder replacement theory is really what it is. Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, Laxman Narasimhan.
It's like a bookmark, a placeholder. A placemat.
From Starbucks. But the thing that makes Rajesh different is Rajesh has been on other boards before. He's incredibly well connected to this board. Meaning they're all working very well together.
They're all comfortable with him.
Rajesh is inside 2 degrees to 3 other board members, Ellison, Walsh, and Schwab. And despite FedEx having a policy that they can't have interlocks between executives and board members, the policy doesn't cover second degrees and sitting on other boards. It only covers if you're an executive at this company and that other person was an executive at this company. So here you have an aggressive founder. This is a history of strong performance. If you're a shareholder, you love the dividend, you love the buybacks, they're profitable and they keep being profitable. You love all this stuff. They're cutting costs. So you're getting your palm greased by a strong founder who's generally outperforming, except there's no real replacement for him because Rajesh is just a lackey.
He's 80 years old.
He's 80 years old.
Yeah, I'm not. You would think like in the Nike situation, you at least think we'd have his son on the board, right, or his daughter, or somebody.
He does have a son who's a high-level executive at FedEx,
but not good enough to be on the board.
But he also is invested in, not good enough to be in the board, but he's also invested heavily in his other kids' projects, like media, and he's doing lots of stuff. I mean, he's a minority owner of the Washington Commanders, or was. He's into sports. All that to say, this is effectively the Fred Smith show, which is what you would expect.
Yeah.
Which is what you'd expect. So if you're going to accept this trade-off, where you get your palm greased, it's a Fred Smith show. You know he's got, his toys and friends on the board to some degree. You know that like the company's performing well. He's a war hero. Like, I don't have anything bad to say about Fred Smith. If I were Fred Smith, I'd probably do all the exact same things that Fred Smith has done, right? Like, there's nothing bad about what he's doing. The bad part is the accountability part. You do not have to give up all accountability. All you have to do is vote your shares. So you're not surrounding the strong founder who's going to be strong all day. He doesn't need help from his friends. You don't need the other people on that board. You don't need Fred Smith to control the board and the company. He can control just the company, lead it into the future, into into the stars. You can keep him happy. He's going to be happy no matter what. He's going to have power no matter what. You don't need directors tenured since Clinton's second term to keep him happy, which is what Paul Walsh is. You don't need a lackey CEO on the board. We say all the time on this show, you can vote against the CEO on the board without them not being the CEO. The CEO does not have to be on the board. That is not a rule. They like it, but you already have the real CEO on the board anyway. You have Fred Smith. You don't need another one.
No.
So here's my votes.
Yeah, in a nutshell, what do you got?
I am saying you vote against Marvin Ellison. He's been there since 2014.
Why Marvin Ellison?
He's one of the most connected directors.
You called him one of the others.
He is one of the others, but he's also highly connected. He's the connective tissue because
too much.
He's the CEO of Lowe's.
Yeah.
I say you vote against Brad Martin. He's been there since 2011.
Yeah.
And he's one of the why do you need an ex-Tennessee senator from 20 years ago on this board anymore? He's not bringing
access, I suppose.
There's not real access.
This guy has been a director everywhere. Can I just tell you some of the places he's been director?
Yeah.
Brad Martin, Chesapeake Energy, First Horizon National, Caesars Entertainment, Dillard's, Lululemon, Ruby Tuesday. It goes on and on.
Ruby Tuesday. That's delicious directorship.
People like this guy.
Josh Ramo. According to Free Float data, he has 0% influence.
Yeah,
on this board.
that stood out to me. Former director of Starbucks.
There is no need for him. Like he was a TV personality and a political consultant. You don't need that.
He's probably a friend of Fred's.
Susan Schwab, she's been there since 2009.
We talk about Susan Schwab a lot at this company, yeah.
Because she's on so many boards.
Big
she's
boards,
one of the most
huge boards.
Caterpillar,
And
Boeing.
Marriott.
She was on Marriott. She was on
Boeing,
many
right.
boards. And she was on boards that have not outperformed. Caterpillar and Boeing and Marriott are not the companies that you want to write your case study about
not.
how to be the greatest director. All right. She's a former trade representative in the U.S. government. We don't need that.
Okay.
Like, vote against Steiner, the former CEO of Waste Management. He's been there since 2019, but he's closely intertwined with Smith.
Chair of the nomination committee, David Steiner.
And, vote against Paul Walsh. 1996, really? Can we make a case that a director needs to be on a board for 30 years.
He's also been on 25 other boards, it looks like.
I don't understand. I mean, our investors close. The votes against him was 7%. 7%. There were more votes against Steiner than there were Walsh. Walsh has been there since 1996. I hadn't graduated high school yet, and he was on the board of this company.
Walsh sits
with
on
Fred Smith.
Walsh currently sits on the board of McDonald's, believe it or not, and also just recently on Vintage Wine Estates, which just delisted a few months ago. So that's pretty interesting.
That's always
track record.
that's always a good track record thing to have in your track record. And then finally, vote against the CEO.
I love it.
There's no point in having Rajesh.
Well,
if you vote for nothing else, I would vote out the CEO. On this board,
what I'm hearing is I didn't hear a vote against Fred Smith, and I did hear
I am for Fred Smith.
I did hear a vote against the current sitting CEO. So it sounds like you're consolidating power with Fred Smith.
I'm saying admit what the reality is. You have a strong founder. He's been outperforming. He might be 80 years old, but the fact is he's outperforming. There is no real replacement for him. And if you are an investor, you're probably happy. You don't need the riffraff. You don't need the other stuff.
This is a perplexing one from you. So what about the future at FedEx? If you're putting it all in I get what you're saying, that Fred Smith is shareholder friendly right now. I don't know if he's stakeholder friendly, shareholder friendly. But what about the future? What about the inevitability of Fred going away?
You're trading the now for the future because Fred Smith is not going to replace himself. What he's shown since 1971 when he founded the company, right?
Yeah.
Like he's not going to replace himself.
No.
He's going to maintain control. When he's ready to step down, he'll probably always be like even if Jeff Bezos stepped away from Amazon, was not executive chair of the board, Jeff Bezos is still running Amazon just from a yacht with his new wife, right? Like, or girlfriend. I don't think Fred Smith is going anywhere.
Okay.
In which case, there's no point in sort of thinking of the future except let Fred Smith continue to do what he's been doing until he's literally not there anymore. He sells his shares, he's off somewhere, and his kids are not involved in the company. That's the only time you can think about the future, because otherwise there's kind of no point.
We have a few management proposals and a few shareholder proposals too at FedEx coming up at their meeting on Monday. Do you want to weigh in on any of these, including Say on Pay?
Say on Pay, can we just call, anytime I see an executive chair who was a founder or was the CEO sitting on the board with the current CEO, can we just call the current CEO an NEO and not the CEO and do the executive chair
a president
as the CEO?
Or something? Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems so fake, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So in which case, Say on Pay doesn't matter nearly as much because you're looking at the wrong person's pay. Like that person is not the real influence. They're not even the real one getting paid. They're getting paid less. Fred Smith makes $100 million a year on his dividends.
Well, and you're right to point that out because while there have been a lot of improvements in disclosure and CEO pay over the last 15, 20 years, this one is a major miss. The amount of money that comes in through the shares themselves in situations like this, and maybe like a Tesla, for instance, I think they should find a way to disclose this in the summary compensation table.
I mean, just think of it this way.
Yeah.
When they're negotiating, when Rajesh is like, I want to make an extra $5 million, what is the process for that? The reality is, the process is he goes to Fred Smith and says, can I make another $5 million? And Fred Smith says, no. Is Rajesh the lifelong FedEx employee who's never worked anywhere else, who has a CEO position simply because Fred Smith said he has one? Is he going to walk away? He's going to step down? There's no way. There's no way he does it. He's going to accept because he's glad to have the job, and he knows actually that he's basically a COO to Fred Smith's sort of hands-off CEOing from the boardroom.
Do you think Rajesh looks in the mirror and says, you're the next Fred Smith?
Yes.
All right, finally, there's three shareholder proposals. Do you want to weigh in on any of these?
There's one management proposal that you should absolutely vote against, which is the exculpation.
Oh, yes. We're seeing more.
I don't
of these.
understand
Yeah.
what investor, zero investor should ever vote for exculpation of directors. There's just proposal 4.
Yeah. Except
vote against it.
What we've learned is that if it's a management proposal, they always pass.
They don't even look at it, I think, because if you read it, it says that directors are less liable for doing bad stuff. It makes zero sense.
Makes no sense. How about some
For
of those shareholder
shareholders,
proposals? Yeah.
So there are 2 that were interesting to me. The Just Transition Report.
That's from the
Proposal
Teamsters.
6,
The Teamsters who refused to endorse the president. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like when I read both the proposal and the response to the proposal, it needed translation because it seems like the Teamsters are asking how climate change will affect effectively the employees, like the
workers,
stakeholders,
sure.
the workers, right?
Yeah.
And FedEx responded,
Makes sense.
"We do great on climate change." Right? Like, and that was it. So they're basically saying 2 different things because the Just Transition is about doing great on climate change, but not at the expense of some cohort.
And you're right. They do great on climate change in the sense that by disrupting the climate so heavily with a horrible industry that does not need things shipped so quickly around the world.
The irony being they're one of the best out of their peers, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm on the fence. Yeah. I'm on the fence with these kind of proposals because I do think I love disclosure. I would love to see that report, but I also think if the Teamsters were smart, they would not be asking for this. What they would do is vote out the directors. Why do this? Why this one? You want to make an impact? Vote out some of the people. Vote out the entire committee that is responsible for climate change. They have a public policy and government committee, I think, that's responsible for ESG stuff.
And normally I would support the Teamsters, but after refusing to endorse a president yesterday, including now one of these candidates said that when people go on strike, you should just fire everybody. So, and yet the Teamsters still can't make a decision about who would be a better president. So I say vote no just to piss them off on this proposal. And then finally, you want to weigh in, it looks like on one from the United Church Funds regarding climate lobbying alignment with the company's carbon neutral goals.
So 1,000% for this.
Yes.
Simply because, as I said, when you look at how they actually lobby, they lobby for climate denialists. They basically are in the pocket of conservatives in this country.
Well, you say they, you mean Fred Smith.
I mean Fred Smith. Fred Smith's policy, or his politics rather, are aligned with conservatives in this country. So they are very happy in their lobbying to sacrifice climate change, but very happy to tout their climate progress in their, in their reporting and what they're doing. And even a lot of the investments they're making, I actually think they're doing some interesting stuff. But in search of tax breaks, they're trading off the climate. So I absolutely want a report that shows we give a lot to people who say horrible things about climate is a hoax and all sorts of stuff. And then on the other hand, and we get tax breaks for it. But on the other hand, we're trying to do some climate stuff too. I want to see that misalignment.
All right. Instead of wrapping all this up, I will ask you this, Matt. Will you put your voting recommendations available somewhere? Will they be on our data drop, freefloat.llc?
So I have an amazing data drop this time because I am going to data drop. I have knowledge, the knowledge map for FedEx and its competitor boards.
Oh, I love this.
Because one of the first avenues, the thing when I give an analysis here, you only hear the outcome. Yeah. But the inputs, I'm all over the map. So I did a deep dive.
The painful stage to get to the output.
Yeah. So when the output is as bad as it typically is, the other stuff must have been worse. But included in this data drop is the knowledge maps, but also the data on these directors and their connections. You can, for the first time, see a full connections map.
Yeah.
And the way it works, so and so was on the board of X, who is overlapped with Y, who is on the board of FedEx with them, right? So you'll see it all mapped out there.
Freefloat.llc. And if you can't figure that out,
data drops.
Reach out to us and we'll charge you double because you're too.
Because I had to respond to something.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the Proxy Countdown for the week of September 16th. And I say that's it. That's a lot. Come on, let's be real.
It is a lot.
For the week of September 16th, 2024. Join us next week when we jump back into the alternative democracy pool, forever on the lookout for shareholder sharks, floating band-aids, and wayward directors.
Still gross.